we carried that forward to an economic feasibility, and that's what Amy was referring to, that the cost of that one technology to apply it to this project would double or triple the cost. I don't remember the exact number. But furthermore, we talked to the California Coastal Commission and other folks about our results, and they suggested that we look at not just that considering this technology for the entirety of the intake, but rather a portion, right? Would it be economically feasible if we did a smaller subsurface intake and then relied on the wedge wire screens for the bulk of it? And so we did a study where we looked at a cost analysis where we looked at this subsurface technology from, I think, 2.5 MGD of our total 40 all the way up to the 40 MGD requirement for the plant, and that's 1 million gallons per day. And so in every case, it was still economically unfeasible, no matter how small we went with the subsurface, because of the cost of underwater construction. I know there was a question over here first.
Just curious, why wouldn't you just use the ones that are already the same type that are already in use?
Well, the facilities...
Down there, I mean, down in the south.
Sure, both facilities have their own intake and outfall structures.
So it must have been approved by the state and whatnot.
They were, but the state is getting more environmentally protective than what they once were when those facilities were constructed, and as a consequence, they very well may have somewhat of an open intake. And what the state says now, the Ocean Plan Amendment, one of the most environmentally protective regulations in the world, which was adopted by California in 2015, they require you to consider subsurface intakes first. And if those are not feasible, not technically feasible, then you can consider the wedge wire screening. And so realistically, the opportunity that we have is to work with the existing infrastructure that let's say at NRG exists, and re-engineer it such that it would allow for our design conditions with the screen on the outside.
Just on, so you looked at, there was other locations looked at when you were looking at the subsurface intakes. Where were the ones that were, I mean, to put aside the economic feasibility, where were the ones that were technically feasible using the subsurface intakes that you guys looked at?
What do you mean, where were the?
I thought you said, maybe I was wrong, but I thought you said you looked at a bunch of different areas to put, different locations. Where were those locations, and which ones were technologically feasible?
Oh, I'd have to get down to that detail. I'd have to refer to the report, and again, that will be included in the appendix of our environmental impact report.
And on our website, we have a lot of our research studies and reports there. So westbasin.org/desal, you can find a lot of information.
But if I could add, because it's I think a question we had earlier about looking at, say, in front of LAX. As part of that study, it's not just a matter of constructability, it's also currently endangered species and things like that, terrestrial conditions. And I do believe that if you look north of El Segundo, in front of LAX, all the way up further north, there are conditions that don't allow for just dropping a desal plant, or let alone the intake system in front of that. In fact, I think it's, I could be mistaken, but I believe snowy plover was one of the concerns about the terrestrial.
Snowy clover?
Snowy plover.
It's a bird.
Plover.
Yeah, there's a, if I recall correctly, there's a habitat in front of LAX and that area there, which would impact. So
just a quick question, because I think you did answer my question, but when you say it doubles, more than doubles the cost of the water, I think what you said was that it's initial construction costs, it's not energy costs because of increased resistance.
just construction, correct?
Is there an increased energy cost to operate a plant?
Possibly, but I don't know that information off the top of my head. You are going to be pumping through sand and silt versus a wedge wire screen, so theoretically it would have a higher cost, but I'd have to refer to the report for that.
I'll touch on energy in a moment. So, all right, so let's talk about the discharge. So you've pulled in the water, you've extracted the salts, and what happens with desal is, in order to produce fresh water, you end up with a product afterward called the brine that's twice as salty as the water you pulled in, and so you need to safely be able to return this to the ocean. So again, this is something that's regulated by the Ocean Plan Amendment. There are strict guidelines on the natural salinity levels, how quickly you return it to, or not how quickly, the radius in which you return it to natural salinity levels, so that it, again, doesn't protect any marine habitat there. So what we have here is just a video. This is from Australia, and it's this part of the discharge process is utilizing technology, a diffuser that mixes the water at a certain speed that helps the salt mix in with the ocean water to bring it back to ambient salinity levels. So what this shows you here is, there's plant life growing on the diffuser. There's sea life happening here. Some of the claims that you've heard out there is that it's a dead zone and nothing can survive, and everything is just annihilated. This is just an example of that not happening, and just showing kind of technology in action. So West Basin would design a diffuser to be protective of marine life by complying with the Ocean Plan Amendment.
You know what the radius is? Like how large a radius is it to where we have natural salinity? For example, the beach that we live at.
Okay, so 100 meters is what's set around, and then some of our studies show as narrow as 20 meters that we can get certain things, salinity levels. Again, this is detailed. That's part of our studies online, and then also will be detailed more in our environmental impact report, which we are doing in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA.
Amy, if I could just add that it's 100 meters from the point of discharge, and in our case, that would be potentially several miles off the coast, or at least a mile and a half, 2 miles off the coast, and then 100 meters from that point of the brine discharge is where the Ocean Plan requires us to have a return back within the ambient salinity, so natural ocean water conditions within 100 meters of that point of discharge.
Is there one?
No, there would be a series of diffusers in order to diffuse that much brine out of the ocean. We haven't gotten to that point of design yet.
Yes, ma'am.
So in this scenario, it sounds like we're just getting sea salt putting back. Is there anything mixed in with that sea salt after the end of the process?
It's really just the brine. Actually, I have a little sample here if you wanted to take a look. I mean, you can see a little bit of the salt here, but this is the brine byproduct there. So again, it doesn't answer your question per se about anything added in there, but that's what it looks like.
Would that information be available on the website?
As far as what, the treatment?
Yeah.
I don't think it's fully detailed there. So, Eric, unless you have anything else to add as far as the treatment is, what's it to the brine?
Yeah, we're still investigating this. So the real key here for folks to understand is that we are not in design of a system. We are not about to construct a system. We are in the environmental impact assessment portion. As part of California's Environmental Quality Act, we as a public agency are required to investigate all of the impacts that a public project would deliver. And so we're very much in the investigatory stages of this project where we are considering what those impacts are going to be. And our project will be shaped based on what impacts we find and based on the public input that we receive through the EIR process. And so we have a general idea of the technologies that will be available. That does include microfiltration and reverse osmosis, which are technologies used here in water recycling. But it's not set in stone at this stage as to what technology we would be used. Now we will be held to whatever our EIR indicates we'll look at. So we can't put things in our EIR and then just go completely off the rails in the design. We will be constrained by what we said we were doing in the EIR. And so to the question specifically about the brine return, there will be chemicals and upstream treatment processes that happen before the reverse osmosis, but the brine that gets returned to the ocean will largely be solely concentrated seawater.
Eric, you mentioned that you guys are here to look at all the impacts. Does that include economic impact?
Yes, it does.
Will that be in the
not as
EIR?
part of the CEQA process. CEQA does not require you to look at the economic feasibility or the economic impact. But as due diligence, West Basin is absolutely looking at the impact to its ratepayers that desal would bring. And frankly, there will be a balance between, the high cost versus the availability, right?
And I have one more slide here on cost and energy, and then we'll wrap it up. But I think we're going through the questions as we go, so I'm not too concerned about leaving time for questions. But I will just add one more point on the discharge here. We're also required to have permits to discharge. So there is a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit that is required, and that's something that you get from the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. So they're in addition to the regulations, there's permitting as well. And then just a few photos. So this is just some photos that we had a diver take out in the area that we're looking at around NRG. So the habitat, sandy bottom, not a lot there. There's no sensitive species that are particularly sensitive bottom dwelling species. For example, purple urchins. We've examined and there aren't any that are there, and that's also part of the environmental impact study. The marine life element there, and then energy. So this is another concern of the board and the district, and as well as other folks, in terms of how much energy is required in order to desalinate water. So what we're looking at is, we've made, like I mentioned, the commitment of being neutral, that amount of beyond imported water, we would offset that. We're looking at renewable sources of energy. And what we've done is, again, technology has enabled us to reuse some of the energy that the processes are creating. And this is an energy recovery device there in the corner. And so what we found was that, desalination with no energy recovery device is about 6,800 kilowatt hours. Then we have with the energy recovery device, and then the comparison here of recycled water. So that difference between the imported water and the energy recovery device, that's the element that we are committed to offsetting and looking through for renewable.
Just a comment on this chart though. When you say imported water, you're just talking about the 2/3 water that we get from either the Owens Valley or
The metropolitan water. Mm-hmm.
But the water we get from, for example, from the Delta is much more expensive in terms of energy than the water we get from Colorado River, I think, because you have to pump it over Hatch Creek. So it's a little misleading because that's sort of an average. But if you're going to say we're going to pull water from the Delta, that's much more expensive, I think, than the numbers that we're
So
showing.
good point. But I think it's an average.
Yeah.
You're going to add something, Eric?
We use the average because we don't get to select whether we get water from Colorado River or from state water.
Right, but if we do a development in the Delta and we bring in more water, that more water that we bring in, the extra water is going to be more expensive than the 3,000.
Sure, and historically, the bulk of our water supply does come from the Delta area. In the last 5 years with the drought in Northern California, the shift of our water supply has been moved to become more reliant on the Colorado River supply, which is why our water's gotten a little bit saltier in the last year. Yeah, but now with all of the rains in Northern California and the snowpack return, we will expect to see a shift back to that state water project, which is
More expensive.
correct. Yeah.
By the way, on your chart, you don't actually say it. I assume that's 8 per acre foot of water or something.
I'm not positive, but I guess I would say my understanding is that it is a weighted average. So meaning it's not just the Colorado River.
No, I'm just saying, you're listed in kilowatt hours. It's kilowatt hours, I assume, per acre foot or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember the genesis of
Okay.
the slide.
Does the Colorado Flat facility use solar or renewable energy sources now?
I think, I'm not sure how their power structure works. I think that I feel like I have a lot of questions to follow up with you about the Carlsbad. That's not my backyard, but I should know more. So
Because
let me.
It's working, it's working.
Let me get back to you on that one. So, cost, that's another big concern too. Like I mentioned, keeping it cost competitive with our recycled water is what we're committed to. And also, again, being mindful of, impacts on ratepayers. So just to show you a sense of, it's broken down a little bit different ways in cost per gallon. Really, the industry talks about cost in water per acre feet, which is 325,851 gallons. And then the cost at the top really, the cost per acre fee. So you could see, so there's, in the EIR, they're examining two capacities, a 20 million gallon per day and a 60 million gallon per day.